What if I told you that behind these sacred walls, two people sworn to God were risking everything for a love they were never meant to feel? A priest, a nun, and a secret that could destroy them both. But when their hidden romance was finally discovered, the punishment was far more terrifying than anyone expected. Imagine medieval Europe, a world ruled by faith, where the church held more power than kings, where vows were not promises, they were chains. To become a nun or a priest meant giving up everything: love, family, desire, even your future. Yet history tells us something powerful. No matter how strong the rules, the human heart has always found a way to rebel. Tonight, you're about to hear the true inspired story of a priest and a nun whose secret romance shocked their entire religious community and exposed the fragile line between holiness and humanity. And what happened to them afterward still haunts historians today. The year was 1347. Inside a remote convent in northern France, life followed strict rhythm: prayers before sunrise, silence during meals, eyes lowered at all times. The nuns were not allowed to speak freely. They were not allowed to touch, and they were certainly not allowed to feel desire. Just beyond the convent walls stood a small parish church. That's where Father Matthew served. Young, educated, soft-spoken, unlike many priests of his time, he was assigned to hear confessions for the convent. And that is where he first met her, Sister Eleanor, barely 20 years old, placed in the convent not by choice, but by her family, who could not afford her dowry. From the moment their eyes met across the wooden confessional screen, something changed. Neither of them spoke of it, but both felt it. At first, their conversations were innocent. Confessions, spiritual guidance, words chosen carefully. But slowly, the pauses grew longer, their voices softer, their questions less about sin and more about life. Eleanor spoke of loneliness, of dreams she was never allowed to chase. Matthew listened, and when he spoke not like a priest, but like a man. Each meeting left their hearts heavier, because every time they walked away, they wanted to stay, and that desire terrified them. Still, they returned, again and again, until one night, something crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. It began with letters, hidden between prayer books, slipped beneath stones in the garden. Short sentences, dangerous sentences. I think of you when I pray. I fear God less than I fear losing you. Soon, letters became meetings. At night, when the convent slept, behind the herb garden, where moonlight touched the stone walls. They never touched at first, just stood close enough to feel warmth, to feel human again. But love is patient only for so long. One evening, trembling and breathless, their hands met, and in that moment, they both knew there was no turning back. Secrets rarely stay buried. Whispers began spreading among the nuns. A sister noticed Eleanor returning late. Another found a letter hidden in a psalter. Suspicion turned into fear, because in the medieval church, breaking vows was not just sinful, it was criminal. If discovered, Matthew could be stripped of priesthood or imprisoned. Eleanor could face lifelong isolation, or worse. Still, they continued, because by now, their love was no longer a choice. It was a need. Until one stormy night, everything collapsed. During midnight prayers, the convent doors burst open. Torches flooded the hall. The abbess stood at the front, holding a letter. Their letter. The room fell silent. Then the accusation was spoken aloud. The priest was summoned. Eleanor collapsed to her knees. But the true shock came moments later, when she confessed something no one expected. She was with child. Gasps echoed through the chapel. For the church, this was not just scandal. It was humiliation, a public wound, and the punishment had to be severe, to serve as a warning to all. Father Matthew was arrested immediately. He was defrocked in public, his robes stripped away before the town. He vanished from records soon after. Some say imprisoned, others say exiled. His fate remains unknown. Eleanor's punishment was recorded. She was sealed into permanent isolation. A small stone cell, one window, one meal a day. Her child was taken at birth, never returned, and according to convent accounts, she spent the rest of her life in silence, praying not for forgiveness, but for memory. Centuries later, historians still debate this story. Was it sin, or was it something far more human? Because when we strip away the robes, the rules, the fear, what remains are two people who wanted what everyone wants: to be seen, to be loved, to belong. The church sought obedience, but the heart answered differently. And that conflict between duty and desire has echoed through history ever since. So tell me, if you were forced to choose between faith and love, what would you choose? Let me know in the comments. And if stories like this remind you that history isn't just dates, but real human lives, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us, because history still has many secrets left to confess. Until next time. They thought the story ended when the convent doors closed. They were wrong, because the child born from that forbidden love did not disappear, and years later, his existence would reopen a scandal the church tried to bury forever. He vanished. She was sealed into isolation, and their newborn child was taken away, without a name. Official church records claim the matter was resolved, but history rarely ends where ink says it does, because whispers survived. Whispers of a boy raised in secrecy, and a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. Tonight, we follow what happened next. The baby was removed before sunrise. No ceremony, no blessing. He was recorded only as infant of scandal. He was sent to a monastery orphan house miles away, raised by brothers who were never told who his parents were. But something about him stood out. He learned to read unusually fast, understood Latin before most boys his age, asked questions no one could answer, and one brother noticed something troubling. The boy prayed, not like someone seeking God, but like someone searching for someone. Back in the convent, Eleanor remained alive, but barely. Her cell allowed no visitors, no letters. Yet records note something strange. Every night at the same hour, she sang soft hymns, lullabies, songs meant for a child. The nuns said the sound was unbearable, because it reminded them that what they punished as sin had once been love. Years passed, but she never stopped singing. At age 16, the boy was given a task: to copy old manuscripts. One night, he discovered a sealed document misfiled among church records. Inside was a confession, written decades earlier, by Father Matthew. In it, he wrote, "If my child lives, let him know I loved his mother, not in rebellion, but in truth." The boy realized something terrifying. This confession described him. His hands shook. His entire life a lie. Against orders, he traveled, village to village, asking questions carefully. Most doors closed, until an elderly nun whispered, "She still sings." That was all she said. He followed that clue to the convent. The same walls, the same silence, and behind a locked door, he heard it. A song. The same melody he remembered from childhood. A tune he had never been taught. The abbess refused him entry, but fate intervened. That night, Eleanor collapsed. Believing she was dying, the sisters unlocked her cell. The boy, now a man, stood outside. When she opened her eyes, she saw him. No words were needed. She reached for his face, and for the first time in 20 years, she spoke. "My child." She died before sunrise, holding his hand. The man demanded justice. He revealed the confession, the letters, the records. The church was forced to respond. Quietly. No apology was issued, but the isolation cells were abolished soon after, and the convent was later closed. History doesn't record this as justice, but as consequence. The man never became a priest. Instead, he became a teacher, teaching children to read, to question, to think. He never spoke publicly of his parents, but in his final manuscript, he wrote, "They tried to erase love. They failed." That document survives, hidden in archives, a quiet rebellion against forgetting. History often tells us what rulers wanted remembered, but not what people felt. This story reminds us that even in the darkest centuries, love still whispered, and sometimes it survived. If this story moved you, leave a comment. I read every one. And if you want more hidden stories history tried to bury, subscribe, because the past still has secrets left to reveal. They punished the lovers. They silenced the mother. But one question terrified the church far more than scandal. What if people found out this wasn't the only case? For years, historians believed the priest and nun scandal was an isolated tragedy. One mistake, one forbidden love. But hidden documents reveal something far more unsettling. This was not about morality. It was about control. Because once people realized even the holiest were human, obedience began to crack, and the church moved quickly to make sure that never happened again. Months after Eleanor's death, a sealed directive was issued. Only abbesses and bishops were allowed to read it. The order was simple. Future incidents shall be resolved quietly. No trials. No public punishment. Silence. Isolation cells multiplied across Europe. Records were altered. Names erased. History rewritten in ink. Across Europe, similar whispers appeared. A convent in Italy where a nun vanished overnight. A monastery in Germany where a priest was reassigned and never returned. A baby found at a church gate with no record of birth. Different places. Same pattern. Same silence. And anyone who asked questions was warned to stop. In the 1600s, a church historian named Brother Alain de Roche began comparing records. Dates didn't match. Punishments vanished. Entire pages were missing. He wrote privately, "We do not preserve truth. We preserve authority." Weeks later, his work disappeared. So did he. Official cause, illness. But his final journal entry survived. One sentence. They fear love more than heresy. The church wasn't afraid of romance. It was afraid of choice. Because once someone chose love over vows, they proved vows could be questioned. And once vows could be questioned, power weakened. Love wasn't the sin. Freedom was. So they buried stories. Not to protect God, but to protect order. Centuries later, during restoration work at the original convent, workers found a hidden wall compartment. Inside, 3 letters. One hymn. One line written repeatedly. We were human. No names. No dates. Just truth. Official history speaks of discipline. But human history whispers of longing. Not rebellion. Not corruption. But people trying to survive lives they never chose. The priest. The nun. Their child. Not villains. Not saints. Just human. Today, we still wrestle with the same question. How much of ourselves must we surrender to belong? Institutions change names. Rules change language. But the struggle remains. Obedience versus identity. Silence versus truth. And history warns us what happens when silence wins for too long. They tried to erase their love. They erased their names. But they couldn't erase the echo. Because stories survive. Where power fails. And as long as we remember them, they were never truly silenced. Smuggled through monastery gates. Confessions that were never meant to be heard. Some formed secret relationships with local women, widows, servants, even nuns from nearby convents. Others turned inward toward each other. Same halls, same beds, same forbidden closeness. And while the church publicly preached purity, privately, it punished these acts with terrifying severity. But here's the twist. Many abbots knew, and some looked the other way. Why? Because exposing the truth would shatter the image of holiness itself. By day, these men were holy. They prayed. They fasted. They copied sacred texts by hand. But by night, they lived double lives. One monk in 14th century France secretly fathered 3 children, all while remaining a respected member of his abbey. Another kept a lover hidden in a nearby village for over a decade. And some monasteries became so infamous that locals joked, "The walls are holy, but the men are not." Every knock at the gate brought fear. Every sermon about sin felt personal, because discovery didn't just mean shame. It meant exile, public humiliation, or worse. Then came the moment that changed everything. In the late Middle Ages, church authorities began secret investigations. They expected to find a few isolated sinners. What they found instead was widespread, systematic secrecy. Entire communities living in contradiction. Monks confessing through tears, some begging for forgiveness, others refusing to repent. And here's the most shocking part. Many didn't regret the love. They regretted only being caught. For some, those stolen moments of affection were the only times they felt truly alive. Imagine believing your soul is damned and choosing love anyway. The church responded with reforms, stricter rules, harsher punishments, greater surveillance. But desire doesn't disappear because it's forbidden. These hidden lives didn't end. They just went deeper underground. And over time, history buried them. Yet their stories matter, because they remind us of something uncomfortable and timeless. No institution, no matter how sacred, can erase human nature. Faith can guide, rules can restrain, but desire? Desire finds a way. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Were these monks sinners who betrayed God, or human beings trapped by impossible expectations? If this story made you see medieval history differently, tap the like button. It tells the algorithm this story deserves to be heard. And if you want more untold histories, the secret lives, forbidden truths, and human stories behind the past, subscribe, because history isn't just about what was written. It's about what was hidden. You might think the church ended these scandals, that stricter rules finally crushed temptation. But what if I told you this was only the beginning? The church didn't just punish sin, it managed it. When scandals threatened public faith, they weren't exposed. They were buried, records quietly rewritten, monks transferred to distant monasteries, accusations labeled temptations of the devil. In some cases, entire communities were sworn to silence, because a scandal revealed was worse than a sin committed. And so the secrets survived, not in sermons, but in whispers. Some monasteries gained dark reputations. Villagers warned their daughters. Travelers shared rumors in taverns. Certain abbeys became known not for holiness, but indulgence. Wine flowed freely, rules relaxed, discipline eroded. And when temptation becomes routine, it no longer feels like sin, it feels like survival. Not every secret was reckless. Some were deeply human. Letters reveal monks who fell genuinely in love, who wrestled with their vows, who begged God for forgiveness, and still chose affection. One monk wrote, "I love her as I fear God, and I know not which weighs heavier." For these men, desire wasn't rebellion. It was connection, and giving it up felt like dying twice. History rarely tells their stories. The women who loved monks lived in shadows. Some were abandoned when investigations began. Others bore children who could never be acknowledged. No support, no protection, no mercy. If discovered, they carried the blame alone. And while monks could be reassigned, these women were erased. The greatest punishment wasn't exile. It was guilt. Monks tortured themselves through fasting, self-denial, and isolation. Some believed pain could burn desire away. Others spiraled into despair. Church writings describe monks plagued by visions, dreams filled with shame, fear that God had already turned his face away. For many, the cloister became a prison of the mind. Some monks couldn't endure it anymore. They fled. Abandoning vows meant losing everything: identity, safety, salvation. Yet records show men who chose exile over silence. They vanished into cities, became teachers, merchants, even soldiers, choosing an uncertain life over a holy lie. Why don't we hear these stories? Because history favors institutions over individuals. Stone buildings survive. Human suffering does not. Archives were sealed. Confessions destroyed. Narratives polished. What remained was an image of purity, not the truth of struggle. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't just medieval history. It's a warning. Whenever institutions demand perfection, humans learn to hide. Whenever desire is demonized, it doesn't vanish. It waits. Those monks were not monsters. They were men who believed deeply and loved deeply, trapped between heaven and humanity. And maybe that's the real lesson. Holiness without compassion creates silence. Silence breeds secrecy, and secrecy destroys souls. So ask yourself, if you were forced to choose between faith and love, what would you sacrifice? If this story moved you, leave a comment. I read everyone. And if you want more hidden histories they never taught us, subscribe, because the past isn't silent. We just stopped listening. Not every monk escaped. Not every secret stayed hidden. Some were discovered. And what happened next was far worse than sin itself. Monasteries were built on obedience. That made betrayal easy. A whispered confession, a jealous glance, a rival seeking favor. Sometimes the informer was another monk. Someone desperate to protect his own secrets by exposing someone else's. One accusation was enough. No trial, no defense, only suspicion. And suspicion, in medieval Europe, was deadly. Accused monks were summoned at night. No audience, no witnesses, only an abbot and God. Confession was demanded. If they denied it, punishment followed. If they admitted it, punishment followed anyway. Some were beaten, others starved, some forced into isolation until their minds collapsed. Truth didn't matter. Compliance did. When the church wanted fear, it made an example. Monks were paraded before communities, robes stripped away, heads shaved again in shame, crimes read aloud. The same man once praised as holy, now treated as cursed. Villagers watched in silence. Because if a monk could fall, anyone could. Some punishments were never spoken of. Hidden beneath monasteries were cells. Small, cold, lightless. Monks sent their disappeared from records. No names, no dates of death, just silence. Some historians believe these men were meant to be forgotten, as if they never existed. By the late Middle Ages, the problem grew too large. Too many accusations, too many scandals, too many secrets. Church leaders feared something worse than immorality. They feared exposure. Because if the faithful knew how common these acts were, trust would collapse. And in some places, it did. When the Protestant Reformation erupted, these scandals became weapons. Pamphlets accused monks of hypocrisy. Artists painted grotesque images of corrupted clergy. Former monks spoke publicly for the first time. Their stories shocked Europe, not because sin existed, but because it had been hidden for centuries. The cloister was no longer sacred. It was suspect. Some former monks wrote memoirs. They described fear, loneliness, desire they were taught to hate. One wrote, "I did not flee God. I fled the lie that God hated my humanity." Those words spread like wildfire. For the first time, the monks were no longer shadows. They were voices. Here is the tragedy history reveals. Desire didn't destroy these men. Denial did. The refusal to speak. The refusal to understand. The refusal to see monks as human. When people are forced to be angels, they break. The monastery promised heaven, but for many, it delivered silence. Yet even in silence, desire spoke. Quietly, desperately, humanly. And that may be the most honest truth medieval history ever left us. If you lived then, with no choice, no escape, would you obey, or would you love? They swore vows before God, but behind monastery walls, some vows were broken in silence. Today, we reveal the secret relationships between nuns and priests in the Middle Ages, stories buried, burned, and erased. Backhand Index Pointing Right. Subscribe for more hidden church stories every week. Imagine being locked away at 14. No choice, no escape, only prayers, until love finds you where it's forbidden. These aren't legends. They're real stories the church tried to silence. In the Middle Ages, thousands of girls were forced into convents. Priests lived beside them, confessors, teachers, spiritual guides. But humans don't stop feeling, even when the church commands silence. In 12th century France, records reveal a priest secretly visiting a nun's cell at night. Their relationship lasted years, until she became pregnant. The punishment? He was transferred. She disappeared. No trial, no mercy. But this wasn't rare. Church records show hundreds of cases, coded as moral failures. That phrase hid love, fear, and desperation. And one story shocked even medieval Europe. Stay until the end. You'll hear the most dangerous forbidden affair ever recorded. Some lovers wrote letters, hidden inside prayer books, written in secret code. One nun wrote, "I love you not as sin, but as truth. Those letters survived because monks forgot to burn them. The church didn't deny these relationships. Instead, it covered them. Councils ordered silence. Punishments favored priests. Nuns were locked away, or worse. History remembers power, not pain. Some convents had secret graveyards. Babies born in silence and buried in it. Archaeology confirms it. Faith collided with reality. But one forbidden relationship nearly shattered the church's authority. A priest refused to abandon her. A nun refused to repent. Their punishment shocked Europe. They were paraded publicly, stripped of status, declared living warnings. Yet people whispered, not condemnation, but sympathy, because everyone saw the truth. They were human. The secret relationships between nuns and priests in the Middle Ages weren't scandals. They were symptoms of a system that feared love. History isn't clean. It's human. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more. Hidden history lives here. What do you think? Were these sinners or victims of their time? The trial was over. The sentence had been spoken. History tells us that was the end. But that's a lie. Because what happened after the church closed its doors was far more disturbing than the affair itself. This is the part they didn't record. The part they tried to erase. This is what came next. Sister Beatrice was not taken to a normal cell. She was taken underground. Beneath the convent, past storerooms and burial vaults, was a narrow stone chamber, used only for grave offenses. No window, no candle at night, no human voice. The door closed with a sound she would later describe as the world locking itself away. For the first weeks, Beatrice spoke to no one. Not guards, not God. She counted time by the drip of water from the ceiling. And every night, when silence became unbearable, she whispered Adrian's name, not in sin, but in survival. Father Adrian was marched out before dawn. Villagers watched as his priestly garments were stripped from him. No blessings, no final prayer, only shame. He was sent north to a monastery known for breaking men. Cold, isolated, silent. There, Adrian was forbidden to preach, forbidden to write, forbidden to speak to most monks. But guilt is louder than silence. He replayed every moment. The garden, the letters, her hands in his. He began carving marks into the stone wall, one for every day without Beatrice. By winter, the wall was covered. Officially, no communication was allowed. Unofficially, humans find ways. A traveling scribe, once a student of Adrian's, recognized him during a supply delivery. That night, Adrian begged him to do the unthinkable. One letter. No names. No confessions. Just proof that Beatrice had not been forgotten. The scribe hesitated. Helping a fallen priest could mean execution. But he agreed. Weeks later, deep underground, Beatrice felt something slip through the cell door. A folded scrap of parchment. Inside, 3 words. The same ones that started everything. I remember you. Beatrice cried for the first time in months. Mercy was never the church's intention. The Mother Superior noticed Beatrice's sudden change. The renewed strength. The quiet hope. Hope was dangerous. Beatrice was accused of stubborn pride, of refusing repentance. Her punishment worsened. She was forced to kneel for hours. Denied food. Denied sleep. Other nuns were ordered not to speak her name, to erase her existence. But suffering did not kill Beatrice's love. It refined it. She no longer prayed to be reunited with Adrian. She prayed only that he survive. In exile, Adrian's health collapsed. Cold nights, thin meals, endless labor. One winter morning, a monk found him collapsed in the chapel. Before losing consciousness, Adrian whispered something that chilled the room. She must be free. When he recovered, Adrian made a decision that would seal his fate. He wrote a confession, not of love, but of coercion. He claimed he had manipulated Beatrice, that she was innocent, that the sin was his alone. If the church believed him, Beatrice could be released. The letter was sent. Adrian knew what it meant. The church responded swiftly. Beatrice's sentence was reduced. She would live, but Adrian would disappear. No burial record. No official death notice. Only silence. Some say he was transferred. Others believe he died during interrogation. One final letter was found among his belongings. It was never delivered. Loving you was the most honest thing I ever did. Beatrice was released, but not restored. She lived the rest of her life in quiet service. She never spoke of Adrian. But every year, On the same winter day, she lit a candle alone. When she died, a small scrap of parchment was found sewn into her habit. Faded, worn, cherished. 3 words. I remember you. The church erased their names. History buried their truth. But love has a way of surviving, even in shadows. And in part 3, we uncover how many stories like theirs were hidden, and how some lovers didn't just suffer, they escaped.